Hey everybody, this is Adonexium here with my first video ever. I was asked for a proof of concept for the build potential of the reduced duration Titan with Ember Fusillade. The inspiration for my build comes from the video linked in the description. The video teaches you about the basics of the reduced duration and how it interacts with Ember Fusillade, and I just tried to take it one step further. So to explain the basics for anybody who doesn't know, when you normally cast Ember Fusillade, it'll hover above your character, but with this setup we can get them to fire off immediately. So we take this one step further by adding in multiple projectiles. So as you can see, when these pop off, they start casting like 3 or 4 of them per second. With this, the less cast speed that you have, the more fireballs you can cast per instance of your cast. So right now I have a cast speed of 0.5 seconds, and like I said, I'm able to shoot off 3 or 4 of them at max when it's at full rev by itself. So we take this one step further by adding in the Ashen Staff, and this is very important. You want wild shards in your base one, and scatter shot in the trigger setup, with inspiration, because this build becomes very mana intensive once you start adding in the staff. But as you can see, with inspiration, it fires off at a very manageable rate, and it's not too crazy on your mana, even with Archmage. So, for my setup in particular, we are running Elemental Discharge. There's a lot of other ways you could take this, such as cast on Shock with Lightning Conduit, with Shock Magnitude. But I decided that I wanted to focus a little bit more on AoE clear. So I tried working in Elemental Discharge, which could be super cracked with Temporalis if you're super loaded. And on our primary one, we're running Fork, Mobility, Lightning Exposure, and Considered Casting. So Lightning Exposure could probably be swapped out with Super Critical or Ricochet. Ricochet is really nice for those more annoying maps with a lot of corners. Lightning Exposure obviously scales the DPS of all the stuff I'm using, because I'm using Archmage, which gives lightning damage to everything. So the way I am mainly triggering Elemental Discharge is through an interaction with Raging Spirits and Infernal Legion. So basically, every time I cast the Ember Fusillade and a fire or an ember hits the target, it summons a Raging Spirit, admittedly at a significantly reduced duration. But it's usually still enough time for them to ignite them and maybe get off 1 or 2 hits. But I'm not sure if it's really worth scaling their damage in any meaningful way. So I'm mostly running Fire Exposure and a little bit of Persistence to give them some time to travel to new targets and whatnot. I'm also running Cast on Shock and Grim Feast with Cannibalism and Clarity. I'll usually switch out these two. Grim Feast is for mapping, and Cast on Shock is more for bosses. Time and Need is really great on this build because we can get the duration down to 1.5 seconds with fast forward, and this removes all curses and all elemental ailments, and it heals you. So it is great for dealing with the chip damage to your health, which is really nice because we are using at series disdain also with this build, which just gives us a lot of energy shield, EHP, and it also allows us to convert our base energy shield into mana, which gives us a lot of damage on our Archmage. Theoretically, you could put the fast forward on Ember Fusillade here, the one you cast yourself with Wild Shards, because when you get the proc from Wild Shards, you're going to be getting extra projectiles that aren't going to fire, and the less duration that you have on the skill, the more embers that you can shoot off before you recast. As I mentioned before, less cast time, less cast speed, the better. In fact, I'm running negative cast speed on mine. Here is the tree. So we mainly focus on the skill effect duration nodes here and up here. We also utilize weapon swap to give our curses and other utility spells a lot more duration, and curse effect and curse AoE. It's really nice. But otherwise, there's not really much going on with my gear. There's probably a lot of room for improvement. The more spirit, the better, but you probably don't need as much spirit as I have to get it online. If I was going to take this build to higher places, I'd probably look into Ingenuity and maybe some Venter's Gamble Rings and like a Temporalis, like I said. But I don't know if I'm ever going to be that rich, to be perfectly honest. I'm also running for jewels. The most important is definitely the Prism of Belief Diamond. As many gem levels as you can get on your Ember Fusillade is great. Otherwise, you can just run some generic damage jewels. You don't need to have as nice jewels as me to make this work. And in fact, there's probably a lot of improvement with my jewels with the uniques that I haven't really tried at all. But yeah, as you can see, the Ember Fusillade goes crazy, and then when we staff swap, we got tons of duration on our curse, tons of AoE, Hex Bloom, so you don't really need to swap over to this much once you have it going, but it's really nice. But yeah, that's enough of me yapping. Let's go check out a little bit of mapping. I got a T15 set up here. I'll pull up the details. It's pretty easy T15, but yeah. Let's just show how the build works a little bit here. Like I was saying, there's a lot of different directions you can take the build with anything from cast on shock with the Archmage setup that I have going now. You could also do cast on critical, go fully into the fire damage, which could be pretty interesting if Archmage gets gutted in the next patch. But yeah, I'm by no means an expert build creator. There's probably way better ways to set this up. Right now it feels pretty tanky on T15s, but you know, it's nowhere near what some other people are doing with their energy shield and whatnot. I did work in some of those mana taken before life nodes to once again help deal with some of the chip damage from Etsu's sustain and give myself a little bit more EHP.
In the right hands, this could...
But yeah, I think you guys see the basic premise. If you get in a little bit harder contact, you can just start whipping down your curses. The Sigil of Power and the Flame Wall are more for just like opening up on bosses. When you have some good open time, or if you get better at multicasting than me. I'm a little bit lazy, so I like to keep my buttons to a minimum in the thick of it. But yeah, as you can see, the clear's pretty good. You can see the elemental discharge going off consistently every 1 second, or 0.9 I suppose, since I have 10% cooldown recovery. If you got Temporalis, you could bring this down to 0.1 seconds, I believe, or I can't remember the exact number, but almost every single one of your fireballs from your trigger setup would be triggering elemental discharge at that point. But yeah, I'll go through my tree one last time just so you guys can see what I have going on. Most annoying part about this build is probably going to be the initial leveling. You got quite a few travel nodes here. You may want to level up as something different for a while. But as you can see, we pass through some crits, some life recovery, life regen, mana regen. These max mana regens are life changing. You probably don't need as much as me once you have your build completely fine-tuned. But right now it feels really nice. I'm at 450 mana recovery per second. Also, it's almost essential for me at this point to have all these reduced mana cost nodes. And I even have mental toughness allocated on my amulet just to give me some reduced costs. I'm sure, once again, if you have a perfectly min-max build, all this mana cost maybe won't be necessary. But right now I'm enjoying it. But mostly I just try to path for mana, like hybrid spell damage, because you know we have fire and lightning going on. Energy shield. I really like this node because it gives, you know, spell damage and reduced cast speed, so it's pretty efficient for our build. Here's the mana damage taken before life nodes that I was talking about, which is also nice because it gives a lot of intellect. There's more of these nodes over here, which you could potentially invest into, but I thought it was a little bit too much investment. But otherwise, we just come over here for the Eldritch Battery and the Arcane Intensity and the max mana, and then we come up here for Pure Power with the per 10 Intelligence, because we're going to be intelligence scaling anyway because of the elemental discharge. So it just all works out really nicely. And like I said, you can put the skill effect reduced duration on one weapon set, and then you can go for the opposite on the other set since they're right next to each other, which is really nice. And then there's a bunch more curse duration stuff over here, but I went more so for the basic duration. But yeah, there's probably a lot of different ways you could take this build. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comments. Happy to answer any questions. Thanks for watching. Once again, my name is Adonexium, and thank you for watching my first build.